Good day, everyone. This is Joy Camille Crisostomo from Group 3, and this is our work for Ionic Framework Mobile Learning Application as an partial fulfillment for the Human-Computer Interaction 2 requirements. So now, let's dive into our highlights. In this presentation, we will provide a brief introduction about the app, talk more about the project, know the inspiration for the project, discuss the parts of the output, simulate the app, and know the personal reflections of every members of the group. As an introduction, the INO is a learning application inspired by the website Ionic Framework that focuses on providing information about Ionic. Ionic is an open source UI toolkit for developing applications and mobile-ready progressive web apps using familiar web tools, frameworks, and languages. Ionic also focuses on the front-end UX and UI interaction of an application. So to introduce the app, Iono is a mobile app that targets users that are mainly learning Ionic framework under Angular. The name came from the wordplay of Ionic framework syntax code plus the knowledge. So it mainly focused on giving the users knowledge about Ionic, especially for the beginners. So for the next presenter, here is Jamili Gagama.
So about the project, the group was tasked to develop a learning application using Ionic. So the application should also practice the design principles such as visibility, feedback, constraints, consistency, and affordance. The INO application provides selection of complete guides to start developing your Ionic app. It also provides step-by-step installation when you want to install Ionic on your device. The INO application contains a menu selection such as installation and subtopics like getting started, developing, layout, and cleaning. And more 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 menus like UI components, basic API, and Angular.
So next, my name is Jacinto Bibara, and I will explain the inspiration of the project. So the INO application is based on the existing informational website, which is Ionic Framework, which provides detailed information and resources on the Ionic Framework. It is a project on our course, which is the Human and Computer Interaction tool that enables us to get reviewed the topic and contents of the Ionic framework while applying it to our program itself. With this application, our team aims for a more convenient way to read and review the concept of the Ionic framework. So next.
For the first page of our menu is the home page. It has the introduction of the Ionic framework. It also has tabs to present the overview, goals, affinity, app flow, and ecosystem. We use Hover to help inform the users that the tabs are clickable and scrollable. Next on the menu is the installation page. The installation was categorized into four submenus. First is the getting started. Next is developing, layout, and theming. Getting started provides information on how to set up and start developing applications using Ionic. It also provides the packages that the users need to run Ionic projects. Next is the developing, which provides the tips and basic information to create an app such as scaffolding, previewing, starting, developing for iOS or Android, hardware back button, and keyboard. The layout provides a guide on how to create an Ionic structure, responsive grid, global style sheet, and CSS utilities. The theming has 9 submenus to give users a selection of how they want to design their application. The third submenu is UI components. UI components have an important role in developing the applications. The Ion Known provides the different UI components that can help users to create their UI components. The fourth one on the list is the native APIs. Ion Known also have a guide if you want to add a native API to your Ionic application using Capacitor or Cordova. And lastly is the Angular page. The Angular page contains the overview of Angular version support and tooling, along with different features and characteristics with the use of Ionic Angular. Angular tooling integrates and builds with the official Angular CLI and provides features that are specific to Ionic apps.
Now we will explain and delve into our app. So starting with the app icon, as you can see on the right screen, that is our app icon using Cordova IS. Then there is our splash screen. Let me just here, this is our splash screen containing the app logo, app name, and a short description for the app. And as you can see on our left screen, that is our starting page or the landing page and home page that contains the introduction to Ionic framework displayed visually in the form of a headline. There is a menu tab at the navigation bar. It is a side menu tab with the different components of our app. The side menu have a avatar, a label, and a item for our CSS design. For our app design, and there is a navigation bar that displays the overview. This is a tab menu bar that displays the overview, goals, affinity or the framework compatibility, app flow, and the ecosystem of the Ionic framework. And on the last part of our homepage, you can see a next button that will let the user go to the next menu page, the installation that will be explained by Robin Soriano.
So for the installation page, it contains documentation on how to install Ionic framework in your system, which is guided with the preferred method of CLI or command line interface. The installation page will contain various commands and links to websites and download pages that will help you install Ionic framework. So for the simulation on the left here, it will show a basic overview of how to install Ionic framework and the various TypeScript that can be used in Ionic framework like Angular, React, or Vue. And this is also embedded with a link that will forward to the respective pages. Like here in Angular, it will forward to Angular. So going back to the installation page, if we scroll down a little bit, you will see 4 cards that will also redirect to different parts of our Ionic framework app, which is the UI components, theming, native functionality, and also the installation guide. So Scrolling down a bit more, you will see the, the said documentations that contain on how to run and basic information about Ionic page. So if we go visit the side menu again and click on installation and getting started, here the next page is upgrading to Ionic 6. In here is documentation containing on how to upgrade your Ionic 5 to the latest version of Ionic, which is version 6. And first you have getting started, which contains how to upgrade your version of Ionic that is using Angular. You can see the various codes, commands, and here we use Ionic grid or Ion grid. That is how we represent the code command line like in the website. And if you scroll down further, there will be the other documentation like React, Vue, and the different parts of how to upgrade your Ionic framework. Next page in the installation is the environment setup, which will teach the user on how to set up their what do you call this, their IDE, perhaps like Visual Studio Code, which is the preferred software to operate Ionic framework on. In here we have the terminal, which we use to document how the different what do you call this, like the node and npm, which is also used by Ionic framework. Other pages in the installation page, like in the side menu, like here for an example, installing Ionic framework through CLI, which is the preferred method like I said earlier. And this page also contains on how to start your Ionic framework project, like with the Ionic start and the various templates that can be used by Ionic framework like blank, tabs, or side menu. Other pages in our installation page as the packages or CDN. Here the page contains different scripts that can be used with Ionic framework, like the Plunker or CodePen, which is a frame type. They're like frames. This also includes documentation on how to use it on the different type sets like Angular, Vue, and React. This page also contains the necessary CSS codes that can be used for installing packages. So for the next page, we have Ionic VS Code extension, which is the different what do you call this, extensions that can be used by Visual VS Code, which is Capacitor and Cordova. Next please. In the last page, in the getting started of our installation page, which is a guide to help start with the different type sets like Angular, React, and Vue. For the next sub-menu is the developing page, which contains the needed documentation on how to create content for your Ionic framework app. In this page, starting an app, it will show you on how to create a project again and create the project name and what do you that what do you call this?
The new project and the type of the
The
project that
templates,
will
the templates, the needed templates for the app. Next please. In the next page of the developing, we'll show you how to run your Ionic framework app by using the code Ionic serve. The next page is the scaffolding, which you can think of as the backbone of the Ionic framework, which includes the various files that are needed, like in the source and app. This contains the various documentation on how to handle those files. For the next page is the documentation on how to develop apps for iOS in Ionic framework. In this section, it will show you first on how to use Xcode, which is the required, not required but preferred
simulator
for iOS apps. Here's the different steps on how to set up the simulator Xcode. Here we have the documentation for Android development this time, which requires Android Studio, which is the universal IDE for creating Android apps. It also contains the various steps on how to install Android Studio and how to connect Ionic framework to Android Studio. Here's some development tips that will help the user on the different errors or questions that they may encounter while developing in Ionic framework. This includes commands that can resolve problems or install new extensions and packages. Here we have is the next page is the hardware back button, which is a component that can be used with capacitor and Cordova. Here's the various documentation and slight overview on how to use them. Here we have also the navbar that contains codes for JavaScript, Angular, React, and Vue. Here we have the keyboard page in the developing submenu that includes the on how to customize your on-screen keyboard for your Ionic app. Here we have the various commands that can be used for JavaScript, Angular, React, and Vue also. For the next page, we have structure, which provides this is part of the layout submenu. And first, we have the structure page, which documents on how to properly structure your code in your Ionic framework via VS Code. Here we have the various correct templates that can be used. here is another um, page that can be used by developers in Ionic framework, like responsive grid, which is a grid that is somewhat gives what do you call that, mm,
Like a table or for the pictures, containers,
yes,
and
just like that. Yes, yes.
yes. So you can also modify the grid size. It is also included in the app.
There's also live examples provided in this page that when you click the link, it will forward you to a live example.
Like here.
This link will redirect you to StackBlitz, which is a known, what do you call that, live IDE somewhat.
So let's go back.
Now let's move on to the next page. Here we have the global style sheets that can be used in Ionic framework, which is essential for the design of your Ionic framework app. Here we have the various CSS codes and documentations needed by the user, like padding, text alignment, and other stuff. Next page, please. Here we also have CSS utilities like text alignment, which is important for your paragraphs, different like ion next left, text left, and different other configurations. For the next page in the submenu installation, we have theming, which is documentation for Ionic framework on how to put designs in your Ionic framework app. Here in the first page, we have the different colors that can be used in Ionic framework. Scroll down, please. Here we have the different CS variables. Next, please. Here we have the platform styles, which is essential to use if you're developing either in iOS or in Android. Here we have another CSS variables, but this time for global variables like components in the app. If you take a look on the right side, we have the app components.
Wait, let me check the global. This one, the global variables.
Here, this is where you can use the global variable CSS in the Ionic app. Next, please. Here we have another CSS variables, but this time for shadows that can be used for like hover and other stuff. Here, the next page in our theming submenu is colors, which how to apply documentation on how to apply colors on your various buttons and like grids and stuff. Here we have themes which can be used on the header portion of your app, like the background colors and text colors. Here is a documentation on how to apply dark mode to your Ionic Framework app. This this documentation provides the necessary codes and tutorials on how to apply them to your app. Here we have documentation on how to use advanced themes in Ionic Framework, like two modes, light and dark mode, which can be used interchangeably, and other global variables like um, these ones, grid, application variables. Here in this next page, we have a color generator which lets the user pick and view them live, the different colors that can be used in Ionic Framework. Also, we have provided the necessary codes for them also.
So, um, okay, so UI components. Just like the other pages, you can see the three bar icon on the left side of the screen, and then the user icon on the upper right side of the screen. So in the Ion header, you can see the description of the UI components, and the Ion content. You can see that their application utilizes 33 component UI components, which also offered by Ionic Framework. So as an example, when you click one of it, just like the menu, it will redirect you to an external source or external link, specifically in the Ionic Framework. So as we go back to our application, we use we just wait for our application. So here we use a ion card, ion list, images, and also the font that we use here is Arial Helvetica. So lastly, you can see the previews and the next button.
For native API, our application also have a guide if you want to add a native API to your Ionic application using either capacitor or Cordova. So the native API page is a single page displaying only three blocks of an Ion card design. So that's similar to the installation page and UI components page tackled earlier. So these three blocks, namely the capacitor plugins, Cordova plugins, and Ionic Native Enterprise Edition, redirects the users to an external page or external source that will tackle more specifically the specific subtopic. So, for example, the capacitor plugins, once click, it will redirect you to this website that will tackle the capacitor plugins. Plugins in capacitor enable JavaScript to interface directly with the native APIs, and it will show you more documentation for more documentation the capacitor plugins. Similarly, that's also the purpose of the Cordova plugins page. Once click, it will redirect you to another source, external source, and will show you documentation of that topic. So for Ionic Native Enterprise Edition page, this page has options available for teams or for projects that will require native plugin support. It is a set, or it will redirect you to a web page that have a set of community maintained plugins, and that they can provide common interface for all that you need for Ionic Native. So this is the example of this is the web page you will be redirected to in Ionic Native. So let's go back to our page, and on the bottommost part we still have our next and previous button that will allow you to interchange from one page to another. So for the next page,
So here is the Angular. First, let me introduce what this page is all about. So the Angular page contains 12 subtopics shown in a form of 12 submenus, and the overview of Angular version support and tooling, and different features and characteristics with the use of Ionic Angular. Um, Angular tooling integrates and builds with the official Angular CLI and provides features that are specific to Ionic or Angular apps. The screen will display the page's contents in a horizontal layout with the 3-bar icon for the sidebar visible on the upper left side of the screen, and the user icon on the upper right side. So basically, the Angular page is a learning pack that contains learning materials regarding Angular, which is arranged in a way that will maximize the comprehensibility for the user to fully absorb the topic. So on the first page here is the overview, which is a introduction, introduction of Angular, and there's a one hyperlink on the last paragraph, which gives the user the option to expand their learning materials by us utilizing an external source. Next. Next is here, as we can see, after the overview of the Angular, your first Ionic app of utilizing Angular is shown with a video and a note, and so on. And just as I've said earlier, we have inputted various hyperlinks in order to expand the options and learning materials for the users, and we also pasted a GIF and syntax and queries necessary for Angular application development. Next. Here is the Ionic page lifecycle, wherein we illustrated how an Ionic page works, highly similar to flowchart. And here we made use of table in order to list and arrange at the same time the um, categories, named categories of Angular Ionic syntaxes such as IMView. Here, the event name are listed and what they do. Next. Here on the last part of this page, we enlisted various. Please kindly at the page. Yes, we enlisted various guidance for each life cycle method, which is shown above. Next is here Angular navigation. And speaking of Angular navigation, let me show you our back and next button. And when the previous button is clicked, it will take you to the previous page, and next will take you to the next page. Okay, next. There's a sample. Just as I've said earlier, there are sample syntaxes and queries and notes, tips for the users. Here is the virtual scroll setup. It set up queries, hyperlinks, same pattern, same. Every page has very similar pattern of demonstration of the content in order to obtain familiarity so that the users won't be confused when using our application. Here is the slides. As we can notice here, the order of the pages and the content is progressive, wherein each page contains relevant additional knowledge corresponding to the previous one. Next. There we utilize table runs again. And many hyperlinks for activities and learning materials, and file sources as well. And here is the configuration page. Yes, similar as well. Here we use table with 3 columns. Platform, and so on. And that's the end of our Angular content.
To further explain the design principles that are utilized in our application, we have used, or we have implemented the consistency, the different types of design principles like consistency, feedback, visibility, and affordance, mapping, and familiarity. So, to explain, we have used the visibility in here, the side menu. As you can see, it is in the toolbar, and you can see here and at our home page, the tab menu that will let the user know, or to let the user easily know where is the overview goes, the framework compatibility, flow, and ecosystem. It is also implemented in our inner pages. So I will just explain it here in the home page. Then we have also used familiarity. As you can see here in the icon and the sidebar or side menu, it is the hamburger icon that is commonly used by the application developers, and the buttons, is it is like the usual icons that is used by the professionals and that is seen by the common users. So we will go to the installation page to further explain the design principles applied in our application. So we also applied consistency. As you can see, we have this header that is the same from the start to the last of our application to provide consistency and familiarity to the users. And we also applied affordance, as the user can easily navigate the menu pages and can easily go to the next page using the next and previous button. Then we also provide mapping. Here, as you can see, we have this vertical scroll bar that will let the user know where they are in the page. And here, they can see the hover or the highlight for the menu page that they are selecting. Next, we also applied feedback for the animations, GIFs, images, and videos that are utilized in our app, as you can see, and explained by my group members. So we will now read the reflections. It will be read by Robin Sorian.
So for our personal reflections on the project, the first reflection is from Mr. Aaron Baez. So his reflection is, out of all the final projects that we had regarding programming, this is probably the most challenging, time-consuming, and satisfying. This is the most challenging project since we are all new to mobile app development and no one in the group has any stock or prior knowledge of it. To start, we had to rely on YouTube tutorials and online communities to actually initiate our program. I'm not sure about my group mates, but that's how it is in my case. This project was very time-consuming because of two reasons. First is that my coding is noticeably slow since I'm getting used to the language and commands. Second is that the Ionic framework is so slow and occasionally does not respond. Despite all of those hardships, the result is absolutely satisfying. Out of all the projects I ever participated in, this is where I'm most satisfied as for now. For the next reflection is from our leader, Ms. Joy Camille Chostoma. Her reflection is, leading this team is a pleasure and a pressure as they are all great and full of ideas. Frankly, this project is very hard to conceptualize and execute, as everyone does not have any background in Ionic framework and VS Code. In general, we are all starting from literal scratch, hence relying on external video tutorials and independent learning become our groundwork. The procedure became very hard, but the outcome pays it well. I am very glad that we have made an application even in a short span of time, as each of my teammates is responsible enough to do the assigned tasks disseminated to them. I have learned that effective communication is important within a group and should consider every opinion of the people in your team. Next reflection is from Christine Joy Ibarra. Her reflection is, I felt happy after we finished the final output. I had a hard time exploring the Ionic framework because it is my first time using this tool. I encounter a lot of trial and error making this project. However, those errors cannot hinder our group from making our project wonderful. We partition our tasks so that all members contribute to our project. I am thankful that I had approachable and hardworking group mates. We help each other with our queries about the program. With our team effort and sleepless nights, we finish our task without any problems. Next reflection is from Ms. Jamil Igagamo. Her reflection is, creating a mobile application using HTML is easy because we are familiar with the language. But since it is my first time using VS Code for app development, I had a hard time running the program and navigating through the editor. I managed to follow through our group's progress and help out as much as I can. Thanks to the guidance of my group mates, what made the project generally difficult to complete is the extensive content and link pages on the website we are referencing to. Overall, I am grateful for the hard work of our team now that we are finished this functional and comprehensive application. In the end, this project taught me how to use VS Code, made me practice my HTML and CSS knowledge, and test my endurance in a long coding process. Next reflection is by me. Going into the project, I had very little knowledge about Ionic framework, but with the combined effort of our group, we were able to complete our project, and as for me, I was able to learn a lot about how to work on Ionic framework. On the first distribution of tasks, it took me so long to finish a page because I was unfamiliar with some of the elements. Though some research and also help from my group mates, I was able to finish the distributed task with ease, and on the second distribution of tasks, I was confident in what I was doing. This project for me is right up there for being hard next to game development, and I am pretty happy that we were able to finish this project. That's all for our personal reflections about this project. Thank you.
So that's all for our Ion Know mobile app project for HCI2. And thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.